Hello, and welcome to PlotFall. Tonight, our story takes us into the world of why you wouldn't survive a day as a baker in 17th century Paris. Before we begin, if you find value in these stories, perhaps take a quiet moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps others find the channel. You can also let me know in the comments where you're listening from and the time. It's always fascinating to see our quiet community grow around the world. Now, find a comfortable position, perhaps dim the lights or turn on a soft fan for background noise, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Welcome, weary traveler, to the flickering candlelight of 17th century Paris. Let's gently explore a life you might find rather challenging. The air itself feels heavy, doesn't it? Thick with the mingled scents of damp stone, the pervasive aroma of wood smoke from countless cold hearths, and something else, less definable but distinctly lived in. The city's unwashed breath, carrying whispers of stale beer, decaying refuse in the gutters, and perhaps the faint, unsettling sweetness of the tanneries downwind. It's a tapestry of smells, few of them truly comforting to a modern nose. Imagine, if you will, that you are stirring now, in the deep, pre-dawn chill, long before the first hint of gray even considers painting the sliver of sky visible between leaning buildings. The only light comes from a single sputtering tallow candle, its greasy flame casting long, dancing shadows that writhe and retreat on the rough-hewn walls of your small, cramped dwelling. This room, likely tucked away in a labyrinthine, winding alley paved with treacherous, uneven stones, is probably shared, offering little privacy and even less warmth against the persistent damp that seeps from the very fabric of the city. Outside, Paris is a collection of muted sounds, a slumbering beast slowly, reluctantly waking. Perhaps a distant, mournful dog barks, its call echoing strangely in the narrow confines where sound seems to trap itself. Or you might hear the rhythmic, unsettling scuffle of rats in the walls. A constant, unseen companionship for many. Soon, the iron-rimmed wheels of an early cart will begin their mournful creak and groan over those cobblestones, a sound that grates on the nerves even before full consciousness properly dawns. Your day as a Parisian baker has already begun in this dim, chilly world, a world lit by flame and driven by necessity. There's no gentle easing into the morning here. For you, there is only the pressing, immediate need to face the coming toil. Stepping out from your cramped dwelling, or perhaps even your bakery itself if you're lucky enough to live above the shop, Paris greets you not with wide, sunlit boulevards, but with a tight embrace of shadow. Forget the glittering city of lights. This is a Paris of dim alleys, a web spun from stone and timber. The streets are rarely straight, more like meandering channels than planned thoroughfares. Their surface is a treacherous concoction of packed earth, slick mud, and whatever refuse the previous day, or indeed the previous week, had to offer. You'd navigate these pathways carefully, your worn leather shoes seeking purchase on the uneven ground, trying to avoid the deepest, darkest puddles. Overhead, the upper stories of buildings lean precariously towards each other, almost seeming to whisper secrets across the narrow gaps, blotting out much of the already weak morning sky. This creates a perpetual twilight in many areas, even as the sun climbs higher. The air itself is thick, a potent brew. The sharp, almost acrid, yet somehow comforting scent of wood smoke from countless hearths and newly lit ovens mingles with the pervasive dampness rising from the Seine, a chill that seems to seep into your very bones, regardless of the season. And beneath it all, a more complex, less pleasant undercurrent of smells. Animal dung from the horses and livestock still sharing these urban spaces, the faint, sour tang of unwashed bodies, and the metallic hint of the river's less savory burdens. This is the Paris that breathes around you, a living, odorous entity, a far cry from any pristine image, yet undeniably, intensely alive. And as the very first, pale fingers of dawn begin to stretch across the grimy rooftops, another scent, more focused, more urgent, starts to cut through the complex Parisian air. It's the aroma of baking bread, a warm, almost comforting promise rising against the city's harsher perfumes. This is the domain of the boulanger, the baker. a figure of immense, almost unsung importance in this relentless, hungry city. In 17th century Paris, bread wasn't merely a pleasant accompaniment to a meal. It was the meal for so many. The baker wasn't just a craftsman. He was a lifeline. His small, often cramped shop, perhaps tucked into a narrow cobbled lane, was a beacon of survival. The rhythmic thud of dough being worked, the fierce, contained roar of the oven, these were the sounds that promised another day held at bay from starvation's edge. The staff of life, indeed, and the baker, its weary, flour-dusted guardian. Think of the sheer weight of that responsibility, resting on those broad, capable shoulders. Every morning, long before the rest of the city stirred from its fitful slumber under thin blankets, the baker was already toiling, surrounded by the dry whisper of flour and the intense breathing heat of his oven, the quality of his loaves, the fairness of his price. These were matters of public obsession, even riot. To fail in this duty wasn't just bad business. It could be a spark in the tinderbox of urban discontent. The scent of his success was, for many, the scent of hope itself, a warm cloud in the often cold and unforgiving air. That warm cloud of hope, however, was forged in conditions far from gentle, its creation beginning when the world outside was still lost in the deepest slumber. Imagine, for a moment, your day as a Parisian boulanger around the year 1650. It wouldn't begin with the soft blush of dawn painting the rooftops, nor with the distant, cheerful tolling of church bells. No, your day would commence in the absolute inky blackness of perhaps 2 or 3 in the morning, a time when the city itself felt like a forgotten tomb, utterly still and profoundly dark. The air in your small sleeping space, likely shared, would be icy, a damp chill seeping through ill-fitting wooden shutters and clinging to your skin like a second, unwelcome blanket. You'd shiver, not just from the biting cold, but from the sheer, unyielding darkness that pressed in from all sides, a tangible presence in the pre-dawn quiet. Forget the romantic notion of a rooster's crow heralding the new day. The only sounds might be the distant, mournful howl of a stray dog, or the furtive scuttling of unseen creatures in the ancient walls. Your tiny, unwelcome roommates, already busy with their own nocturnal affairs. Your very first task, before even thinking of flour or flame, would be to simply navigate from your meager straw pallet. You'd move cautiously, feeling your way in the oppressive gloom, trying not to stumble over unseen obstacles, perhaps a sack of precious, rat-nibbled flour, or a slumbering apprentice equally reluctant to greet the brutal cold. Fumbling for flint and tinder, the scrape and spark would be a small, hard-won victory, coaxing a sputtering tallow candle to life. Its greasy animal scent would fill your nostrils, a rather grim perfume to start your day, as its weak light cast dancing, distorted shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The chill of the stone floor under your bare feet would be a sharp, unwelcome jolt, a daily reminder of the hard world awaiting your efforts, long before the first sliver of gray light even thought about troubling the eastern sky. That single flickering flame is your only companion in the inky blackness, a tiny defiant spark against the vast, sleeping city. You'd pull on clothes that offer little comfort, coarse fabrics stiff with cold, perhaps still damp from yesterday's sweat, or the pervasive chill of the room. There's no gentle easing into the day here. It's an abrupt, brutal immersion into discomfort. The air itself feels heavy, laden with the scent of cold stone, stale breath, and the lingering greasy aroma from your meager candle. It's the kind of cold that doesn't just sit on your skin. It seeps into your bones, making your joints ache before the day's real work has even begun. Outside your small window, if you even have one, Paris is a void. No comforting glow of streetlights, no distant hum of traffic. Just an absolute, profound stillness, a silence so deep, it feels like the world itself is holding its breath. Only the occasional mournful hoot of an owl, or perhaps the distant, desperate cry of some other unfortunate soul might ripple through the frozen quiet. Everyone else, the wealthy, the comfortable, even many other laborers, is tucked away, lost in dreams. But not you. Your day started hours ago, in the heart of the deepest night, a lonely sentinel in a slumbering world. It's a stark daily reminder that your life is tethered to a rhythm few others could endure. And so the cycle renews, not with the gentle kiss of dawn, but in the unyielding blackness that still clings to the city, a thick, inky blanket pierced only by the faintest starlight. Forget any notion of a soft mattress, a downy pillow whispering promises of continued rest. Your bed, if you could even grace it with such a gentle term, is likely a lumpy straw pallet, thin and unforgiving, tucked into a cramped, chilly corner. It might be shared with other exhausted souls, their soft snores, a somber chorus, or perhaps even a few scurrying, unseen companions. The faint scratch of their tiny claws, a familiar sound in the quiet. The air itself is cold, carrying the damp, earthy smell of the sleeping pre-dawn city, a stark contrast to the warm, comforting, yeasty aromas that will soon fill your waking hours. But not yet. No gentle bell or distant, cheerful rooster's crow nudges you awake. It's a more primal internal call, the deep, aching protest of muscles already pushed beyond their limits yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Each limb feels heavy as lead, joints stiff and complaining. Or perhaps it's the insistent gnawing of hunger, a hollow, almost painful reminder of the sheer, monumental energy your body will need to expend, just to get through the next few hours, let alone the entire backbreaking day that stretches out before you like an eternity. You rise, not because you are rested. True rest is a luxury you can scarcely imagine, but because you simply must. Because the fires in the great cavernous ovens will not light themselves, the heavy, coarse sacks of grain will not magically transport themselves across the stone floor, and soon, very soon, the city will stir, its collective stomach rumbling, demanding its daily bread. This isn't a choice, so much as a relentless, physical imperative, the harsh reality of your existence, etched into every tired fiber of your being before the first true light even considers gracing the Parisian sky. Even before your eyes fully adjust to the pre-dawn gloom, before the city outside truly coughs itself awake, your mind, or perhaps your very bones, already knows. The first coherent thought, if you can even call it that, is more an imprint of sensation, flour. It's a phantom presence, a fine, almost invisible dust that coats every surface, that you breathe in with the chill morning air, a soft, insistent reminder of the day's first, and most crucial, demand. You can almost feel its powdery texture on your fingertips, even now, still clinging to the rough fabric of your bedding. Then comes the whisper of the yeast, the yalavain, that living, breathing heart of your bread. It's waiting, somewhere in the cool darkness of the bakehouse, a quietly fermenting mass with its own distinct, slightly sour, almost fruity aroma. It's a temperamental companion, this culture, needing constant attention, a delicate balance of warmth and feeding, lest it die and take your livelihood with it. It's a small, gurgling life that dictates so much of yours. And finally, the fire. Not yet a roaring inferno, but the idea of it, the deep, echoing cold of the massive stone oven that must, eventually, blaze with an almost terrifying heat. You can picture the hungry maw of the oven, waiting to be fed with wood, coaxed into life. This trinity, flour, yeast, fire, isn't just a list of ingredients or tasks. It's the relentless, unyielding rhythm that defines your existence. The silent, powerful current that pulls you from your meager rest, day after weary day, to feed a city that barely knows your name. It's a cycle as old as civilization itself, and you are but a single, tired cog within its immense, ever-turning wheel. And so, before the first hint of gray light even thinks about touching the Parisian rooftops, you'd stir. Pulled from that shallow pool of sleep, your limbs would ache with a familiar, deep-seated weariness. You'd make your way, perhaps fumbling in the pre-dawn gloom, down a narrow, rickety staircase. Each wooden step groans a mournful complaint under your weight, a sound as regular as your own breathing, a daily serenade of timber fatigue. The air here is close, still holding the chill of the night, perhaps laced with the faint, almost ghostly scent of yesterday's fires, a reminder of the heat that will soon consume your day. You arrive at the threshold of the forno, the bakehouse. Now try to picture this place. Erase any images you might have of charming, sun-dappled shops with artfully arranged pastries. This is no quaint little patisserie with whimsical chalkboards and the cheerful ding of a bell over the door. No, the 17th century asterisk forno is a workshop, pure and simple. It's a gritty, functional space, likely built of rough stone or timber, its surfaces perpetually coated in a fine, ghostly layer of flour dust that settles on everything, even clinging to the damp patches on the walls. The floor might be cold, uneven stone or even packed earth, unforgiving beneath your worn-out shoes. It's dim, illuminated perhaps by a single sputtering candle, or the faint, hesitant glow of the earliest dawn filtering through a small, grime-caked window. This is where the real work happens, a far cry from any romantic notion, a space dedicated solely to the relentless alchemy of bread. And as your eyes adjust to that profound gloom, you become aware of the air itself, a tangible presence. It's not fresh, not by any stretch of the imagination. Imagine breathing in a constant, almost invisible fog, thick with the ghosts of countless loaves past. Fine, ancient flour dust that never truly settles. It swirls in the faint light, a ghostly miasma that coats your throat, your lungs, with each shallow breath, just as it blankets every surface. You'd taste its dry, slightly chalky film on your tongue, a persistent reminder of your profession. It's a baker's perfume, they might have joked, though the hacking cough it likely induced was no laughing matter. Then, another scent weaves its way through the dusty haze, the faint, almost sour tang of stale beer. It's not an unpleasant smell in isolation, perhaps, but here it speaks volumes of the makeshift leavening, the frothy barm carefully skimmed from local brewing vats, often the only reliable source of yeast. This aroma, yeasty and a little sharp, mingles with something heavier, more acrid. The lingering smokiness from yesterday's bake, and the day before that, and indeed, every day before that. The ovens, often crude brick constructions, rarely had a chance to cool completely, and their smoky breath, laden with soot and the ghosts of ancient ash, permeated every nook and cranny of the workshop. It clung to the rough-hewn wooden beams, seeped into the very fabric of your simple clothes, and settled deep within your hair, a constant, gritty companion. And at the heart of this pervasive, gritty atmosphere, the source of so much of that enduring smoke, stands the oven. It's a monstrous thing, really, built from rough, soot-stained bricks, a hulking presence that seems to consume one entire wall of your cramped workspace. Right now, in the pre-dawn chill, its great, arched opening, its maw, you might call it, is dark and cold to the touch. If you were to lay your hand against its surface, the bricks would feel cool, almost damp, still holding the memory of the night's stillness. A faint, metallic tang might even linger in the air around it, the ghost of cooled iron from its heavy door, or perhaps just a simple stone slab used to seal in the precious heat. This quiet beast, though, is the very core of your existence here. It is both your unyielding tormentor and your steadfast provider. Soon, very soon, you'll need to coax it back to roaring life. A lengthy process demanding patience, well-honed skill, and a weary acceptance of the intense, almost unbearable heat that will radiate from it for hours upon end. The deep orange glow from within will illuminate the inevitable sweat on your brow, casting dancing shadows on the smoke-stained walls of this small world. It's a hungry entity, this oven, demanding a constant supply of precious fuel, demanding your unwavering attention and always, always threatening to scorch your hands, your arms, or worse, if your focus wavers for even a moment. The promise of warm, crusty loaves, the very scent of survival, is inextricably bound to the risk of angry, searing flames. For now, it sleeps, a dormant volcano in your cramped universe, and in these quiet moments, you can almost appreciate its crude, powerful form before the daily battle recommences. Almost. With the oven momentarily pacified, its fiery breath held in check, your gaze might drift to the silent companions of your craft, your tools. They are few and brutally simple, extensions of your own will against the unyielding nature of raw ingredients. There's the long wooden peel, its paddle end perpetually dusted with a ghostly layer of flour, its handle worn smooth, almost satin-like, by countless anxious grips. You'd feel the familiar weight of it, seasoned wood that's absorbed the heat and scent of 1,000 bakes. Lifting it is a practiced art, a careful dance to slide precious cargo into the dragon's maw and coax it out, golden and fragrant. Always that heavy timber between your skin and the inferno. Then, consider the kneading troughs, vast wooden basins that seem almost like small, sturdy boats run aground in your cramped workspace. These aren't dainty kitchen bowls. They are formidable, often hewn from thick, unyielding planks, their insides bearing the scars and stains of years. A faint, earthy smell of old flour, perhaps a splinter or two to avoid. Imagine plunging your arms, elbow deep, into hundredweights of flour and water within these wooden valleys. The initial sticky resistance, then the slow, rhythmic transformation through sheer, relentless effort. Your most essential equipment, though, isn't crafted by a joiner. It's the unwavering strength in your arms, the stubborn endurance in your shoulders and back, the raw human power you must summon before the sun even considers gracing the Parisian sky. These are your true and most strained instruments in this demanding daily symphony of sustenance, each ache a testament to the day's toil. And as those muscles burn, as the first beads of sweat begin to trace paths through the flour dust on your skin, your senses awaken to the very air you breathe. It's a complex perfume, this bakery, far removed from the sweet, sanitized scent of a modern patisserie. The first note to greet you is an earthy one, the dry, slightly musty fragrance of countless jute or hemp sacks. These are the vessels that carried your precious flour, perhaps overland or by river barge, and they retain the memory of their journey. Imagine the scent of old rope, distant fields, and the fine, almost gritty powder that still clings to their rough, woven fibers, a tangible link to the harvest. Then, cutting through that dustiness, comes a sharper, more vital aroma. It's the unmistakable tang of the levain, your sourdough starter, breathing quietly in its earthenware crock or wooden tub. This is the lifeblood of your bread, a living colony of wild yeast and bacteria, and it smells powerfully of it. A primal, slightly sour, almost alcoholic scent, like green apples just beginning to ferment, or a faint whisper of rustic cider, promising flavor and the magic of the rise. But let's not romanticize entirely. Woven into this tapestry of grain and fermentation, another, less welcome, thread persists. It's a faint, furtive scent, a subtle muskiness that speaks of unseen companions, the tiny opportunists who also call this place home. Perhaps a scurrying in the walls, the ghost of tiny paws across a flour-dusted floorboard. Yes, the faint, almost peppery hint of mice, or the heavier damp earth odor that might suggest a rat has passed through, is an undeniable, if unwelcome, part of this bakery's olfactory signature, a constant quiet battle waged in the shadows. These smells, the wholesome and the uninvited, all meld together, a unique atmospheric blend. They become the inescapable air of your world, seeping into your clothes, your hair, a constant companion and reminder of where you are and what you do, long before the first loaf even nears the oven's heat. Beyond these ever-present, uninvited aromas, your attention must turn to the very heart of your craft, the flour. Forget the silken, snowy powder of modern kitchens, the kind that drifts like a soft winter fall. What sits before you in rough, heavy sacks is a far more rustic, unpredictable character. Scooping it out, you'd feel its coarseness, a distinct grittiness between your fingers that speaks of less refined milling, of husk and bran still stubbornly clinging on, reminders of the field from which it came. The color, too, is rarely a pure, pristine white. More often it's a muted beige, a dusty gray, or even tinged with a faint earthy brown, varying with the grain, the particular harvest, and indeed the honesty of the miller. And honesty, well, that's another variable entirely, isn't it? You might run your fingers through a new batch and find it surprisingly dense, perhaps a little too smooth in certain patches, or with an unnatural, chalky pallor that just doesn't sit right. These are the quiet, unsettling telltales of adulteration. Fine chalk dust, cleverly mixed, could bulk out a sack, deceiving both the eye and the scales, a common trick to stretch meager profits. More disturbing still were the persistent grim whispers of ground bone. Yes, actual bone, milled into a fine powder, a truly ghoulish addition, lending a subtle, inexplicable weight, and, if you were particularly attuned or unfortunate, a faint, almost mineral scent. You try to push such thoughts away. Each delivery, therefore, is a quiet gamble, a fresh uncertainty. Will this sack yield a robust, lively dough full of promise? Or will it prove stubbornly inert, a dead weight, refusing to rise and demanding even more of your precious, dwindling energy? This fundamental ingredient, this very soul of the bread you strive to create, is a constant source of quiet anxiety, a challenging puzzle to be solved anew with every pre-dawn start, long before the first spark even dreams of igniting the oven's waiting belly. And so, with this quiet gamble settled in your mind for the moment, or at least accepted, the physical work begins. Imagine yourself, in the dim pre-dawn chill of your small Parisian bakery, reaching for one of these sacks. It's not a neat paper package from a modern shelf, oh no. This is a hefty, unwieldy burden, perhaps 5 or 6 stone of coarsely milled flour, encased in rough, scratchy hessian that offers little comfort to your grip, its fibers digging into your palms. You'd brace your legs, bend your knees, if you remembered after years of ingrained habit and creeping fatigue, and then heave. Your back would likely scream in protest, a dull, familiar ache flaring up even this early, a constant companion. Shoulders would bunch, biceps straining as you wrestled the sack from the cold stone floor, its dead weight a stubborn refusal to cooperate, a solid, unyielding mass, flour dust, fine as powdered chalk, and carrying that faint earthy scent you know so well, would puff out from the weave with every movement, coating your hands, your simple tunic, and catching in your throat with a dry tickle that you'd try to cough away quietly. Each hoist, each shift of these precious, unpredictable contents from storeroom to workbench was a small, repeated victory against gravity and the ever-present specter of exhaustion. Your muscles, already protesting this very first major exertion of a long, long day, would burn with the effort, a fiery reminder of the relentless physical demands of your craft. And this was all before the sun had even considered gracing Paris with its pale, watery light, before the true baking even began. With the flour dust still settling, a different kind of weight would soon demand your attention. Water. The thirst of the dough, and perhaps your own dry throat after all that heaving, would need quenching. But water, too, isn't a simple tap away in your humble bakery. No, that convenience is a distant dream. Instead, imagine the journey, often undertaken in the lingering pre-dawn chill, your tired body already protesting as you head to the nearest source, heavy wooden buckets in hand. Perhaps it's the stone-lipped communal well, its damp rope rough and worn under your calloused palms. You'd hear the rhythmic creak of the pulley, a mournful sound in the quiet air as you haul the bucket, hand over slow hand, from the cool, unseen depths. The water, when it finally surfaces, might look clear enough, or it might carry a faint earthy scent and tiny specks of who knows what. Or maybe your precious liquid comes from the Seine itself, a broad, flowing ribbon cutting through the slowly waking city. Its waters, a swirling, murky brew, carry not just life but also the city's discarded secrets, its refuse, its daily grime. You'd peer into your sloshing burden, the surface reflecting the pale, emerging light. Sometimes it would seem passably clean. Other times a faint, unsettling film might shimmer there, a greasy rainbow. Each drop used in your bread was a gamble, a silent, anxious prayer that this particular bucket wouldn't be the one to bring sickness to your customers, or indeed, to your own household. The cold splash on your skin, the sheer, uncompromising weight of it pressing into your shoulders, straining your arms as you trudged back over uneven cobbles. This was a constant, damp, and heavy companion to your morning's work. Back in the dim, pre-dawn chill of your bakery, another crucial element awaits your attention, something far more temperamental than even the murkiest water. This is your leaven, the very soul of your bread. It's not a dry powder from a packet, oh no. This is a living, breathing, often bubbling entity. Your precious sourdough starter, housed in an earthenware crock, perhaps covered with a damp cloth, tucked away in a corner that isn't too cold nor too warm. You'd have nurtured this starter for weeks, months, maybe even inherited it from the baker before you. A foamy, slightly tangy-smelling concoction of flour and water, teeming with wild yeasts and bacteria captured from the very air of Paris. Imagine dipping your hand, or more likely a worn wooden spoon, into this cool, somewhat sticky, glutinous mass. You'd feel the subtle life within it, the almost imperceptible hum of tiny gas pockets forming and bursting, a quiet, continuous fermentation. It might smell sharply acidic, like green apples, or pleasantly fruity and mild, or sometimes worryingly a bit off, a faint cheesy note that spelled trouble. Each morning, it's a quiet, anxious assessment. Is it vigorous today, full of life, eager to transform your carefully milled flour into airy, delicious loaves? Or is it sluggish, sulking in its pot, threatening a day of flat, dense bread that no one would want to buy? This wasn't just an ingredient, it was a partner in your craft, a demanding, unpredictable one, susceptible to changes in temperature, the quality of the flour, even the humidity in the air. Its mood dictated the rhythm of your day, the quality of your product, and ultimately the satisfaction or whispered complaints of your customers. A good leaven was a blessing, a promise of sustenance. A bad one, a quiet, doughy curse that could sour your entire day's labor. Beyond the whims of your living leaven, another ingredient demanded your utmost respect, a substance seemingly humble, yet laden with unseen weight. Salt. Not just for the subtle, almost magical savory note it coaxed from the flour, transforming blandness into something deeply satisfying. It was also crucial for the very integrity of your loaves, helping to control that sometimes boisterous yeast and strengthen the delicate web of gluten forming within the dough. So you would approach your salt supply, perhaps kept in a tightly lidded earthenware jar to protect it from damp, not with casual generosity, but with the careful precision of a jeweler. Each coarse, crystalline granule, catching the dim bakery light, was a tiny treasure and a significant, often begrudged, expense. The king's tax collectors, you see, had a particular fondness for salt, their ledgers filled with figures that could make a poor baker sigh deeply into the flour dust. This wasn't an ingredient you could afford to be frivolous with. Every pinch was accounted for in your mental arithmetic. You'd measure it out, perhaps with a worn wooden spoon, its edge smoothed by countless dips, your brow furrowed in concentration, the faint dry rasp as you scooped it, the slight sting if a stray crystal landed on a cut on your hand. These were familiar sensations. Too much, and the bread would be unpleasantly sharp, an insult to the palate, and it would shrink your already thin profit margin. Too little, and your bread would be disappointingly bland, its structure less robust, earning you those dreaded whispered complaints once more. It was a constant, quiet calculation, this balancing act between flavor, function, and the ever-present, almost tangible shadow of its cost. This simple act of seasoning, so foundational, was in itself a daily dance with scarcity, a testament to how even the most basic elements of survival could be tightly controlled. And this meticulous attention to detail, this constant wrestling with scarcity, extended far beyond the ingredients themselves. For what was a baker without heat? And what, in 17th century Paris, was heat without an almost unimaginable quantity of firewood? The great maw of your oven, the very heart of your livelihood, was perpetually hungry, and its primary diet was wood, endless cords of it, a constant, demanding presence in your already crowded existence. Picture the scene, if you will, as you step into the cool, dim space of your bakery well before dawn. There would be no neat stacks of pre-cut logs delivered to your door. Instead, you'd face rough-hewn branches and hefty trunks, perhaps hauled into a cramped yard or even a corner of the workshop itself. Then, the real, back-straining toil would begin. The rhythmic, dull thud of the axe-splitting stubborn timber, piece by laborious piece, would be one of the first sounds to break the pre-dawn stillness. Your hands, already calloused, would know the rough chafe of bark, the sharp sting of fresh splinters, the deep, weary ache in your shoulders and back, before the city outside had even begun to stir. Once chopped, this mountain of fuel needed stacking, a careful art in itself to ensure it seasoned properly, and didn't become a damp, smoky frustration when it was time to fire the oven. Towering piles of it would lean against the stone walls, a constant, woody presence, a silent testament to the energy your profession demanded. And then, there was the smoke. Ah, the smoke. It wasn't just a fleeting inconvenience when coaxing the flames to life. It was a permanent resident in your small world. A fine grayish haze would settle over everything. Your hair, your simple clothes, the very air you breathed, making your eyes water and your throat catch. This acrid scent, mingling with the eventual promise of baking bread, became a constant companion to your lungs, a gritty, unseen perfume that lingered long after the day's loaves were sold. Even before the sun contemplated its ascent, with that ever-present cloak of wood smoke still clinging to the damp morning air, your next battle awaited, the flour, or rather, the grain that would become it. The sacks, perhaps hauled in by dim lantern light, often held secrets within their coarse Hessian weave. You'd untie one, the scent of raw grain, earthy and sometimes a little sharp, rising to meet the lingering wood smoke. Then came the inspection. You'd plunge your hands in, letting the kernels run through your fingers. Was it fine enough? Had the miller done his job with care, or was this a batch rushed through, destined to give you more trouble? Often the answer was the latter. A sigh, perhaps, barely audible in the pre-dawn quiet, as you recognized the telltale grit, the uneven texture that meant more work. If the grain wasn't milled to the delicate consistency your Parisian clientele, and indeed your own standards, demanded, another layer of painstaking labor would unfold. Before the dough could even be dreamt of, you might find yourself stooped over a hand quern, its stones groaning in protest as you forced them round and round. Feel the strain in your shoulders, the rhythmic pull and push, transforming coarse meal into something finer, particle by particle. Or perhaps it was the wide, shallow sieve, its mesh stretched taut. You'd scoop the rough flour in, and begin the gentle yet tiring rocking motion, back and forth, back and forth. A fine, almost ghostly cascade of flour would drift downwards, a soft whisper against the backdrop of your own steady breathing. This additional sifting, this manual grinding, wasn't merely an extra step. It was an invitation for yet another form of dust to join the party. This new powder, finer and paler than the soot, would billow softly, settling like a fresh pale shroud over your workbench, your tools and you. It would find its way into the folds of your already dusty clothes, adding a dry, chalky film to your skin, and another layer of subtle irritation to your lungs, a constant floury reminder of the day's relentless demands. And so, with this pale shroud clinging to you, the real work of preparation begins. Before any water, any leaven touches the nascent dough, comes the crucial act of measuring. Forget your modern, gleaming cups and precise, digital scales. Here, in this dim, pre-dawn Parisian bakery, your primary tools are your own well-practiced eye, and the sensitive touch of your flour-dusted fingers. You'd scoop. You'd weigh it in your palm, feeling for that familiar density, a skill honed over countless near-silent hours. It's an intuitive dance, this tactile assessment, one that a fleeting visitor would find utterly bewildering, likely resulting in bread either as dense as a river stone or as slack as yesterday's resolve. Then comes the sifting, a task both delicate and pragmatic. This isn't just about achieving a finer texture, banishing those stubborn lumps that would otherwise mar the final loaf. It's also a more practical, if less appealing, necessity. As the flour cascades through the wide mesh of your sieve, perhaps a sturdy horsehair construction, a fine, almost ethereal cloud billows gently upwards, adding yet another whisper-thin layer to your already coated apron. You're also filtering out the uninvited guests. Perhaps a stray weevil that journeyed with the grain, a tiny, brittle fragment of husk, or other, less identifiable specks that found their way into the sack during its long, dusty journey from field to mill to your humble bench. It's a quiet, rhythmic task, the soft shush of the flour, a constant gentle whisper against the backdrop of the slowly awakening city, a sound that becomes part of your very being. With the flour now a soft, pale mountain on your bench, your gaze shifts, drawn to the heart of your domain. Before you looms the asterisk pitram, the colossal wooden kneading trough, your silent, demanding partner for the next exhausting hours. This isn't some quaint farmhouse basin you might picture. No, this is a veritable vessel, often hewn from a single massive log, sometimes as long and deep as a small fishing boat. Its ancient wood, worn smooth and dark by generations of flour, water, and the relentless friction of dough, seems to hold the very essence of Paris bread within its grain. Imagine now, tipping sack after sack of that meticulously sifted flour into its cavernous belly, followed by buckets of precious water, hauled earlier perhaps from a public fountain, water that might carry the faint mineral tang of stone, or even a whisper of the city's grimy breath. Then, the all-important leaven, your carefully nurtured chef, bubbling gently with life, its sour yeasty perfume rising to meet you, a promise of the loaves to come. The initial mixing is a slow, deliberate incorporation, your hands plunging into the cool, damp mass that will soon demand every ounce of your strength. It's a sticky, clinging affair at first, the flour stubbornly resisting the water diligently seeking every dry particle, forming a shaggy, unpromising heap. The air around you thickens, not just with the ever-present flour dust, but with the faint, earthy aroma of wet grain and the subtle, tangy promise of the fermenting starter. This is where the true, arduous alchemy begins, a transformation powered entirely and often painfully by your own straining muscles and the sheer force of will. This trough isn't just for a few charming bulls. It's for feeding a hungry, demanding city, one aching armful of dough at a time. Forget any notion of gleaming electric mixers, those whirring saviors of the modern kitchen. Here, in the dim, flour-dusted heart of 17th century Paris, the power source is purely, unadulteratedly human. Your hands, your arms, your shoulders, soon your entire back become the engine for this relentless task. The dough, cool and slightly tacky at first, demands to be pushed, folded, turned, and pushed again. Hour after hour, this rhythmic, almost punishing dance continues, your knuckles white against the yielding mass. You'd feel the gluten begin to form, the dough transforming from a sticky, uncooperative lump into something smoother, more elastic, yet still fighting back with a stubborn, living weight. The only sound, apart from your own increasingly ragged breath and the distant, muffled sounds of the city slowly stirring, is the rhythmic thwack and sigh of the dough against the wooden trough. A fine sheen of sweat would likely coat your brow, mingling with the ever-present flour, creating a gritty paste on your skin. There's no gentle hum of machinery, only the raw sounds of exertion. And for the truly massive batches, the kind destined to feed hundreds of hungry mouths across the district, sometimes even this dedicated, back-breaking hand labor wasn't deemed efficient enough. Imagine, if you will, the bakers, often stripped to the waist in the humid bakehouse, their feet, calloused and undoubtedly less than pristine by modern standards, treading the dough in larger, specially designed troughs. A rather unappetizing image for us, perhaps, but a practical, if not particularly hygienic necessity back then, to develop the sheer volume of gluten required. This wasn't artisanal baking for pleasure. It was a constant, exhausting battle against hunger, fought with sweat and sheer, unyielding physical effort. So, with the dough now sufficiently, if somewhat unconventionally, kneaded, try to truly visualize the sheer scale of it. This isn't a neat, manageable ball you might prepare in your own kitchen. Not even close. Instead, before you would stretch a veritable landscape of dough, a pale, undulating expanse that seems to fill a significant portion of the already cramped bakehouse. Imagine the air, thick with the sweet, slightly sour scent of active yeast, the aroma clinging to the damp stone walls and the rough wooden surfaces, a perfume both earthy and alive. This wasn't dough destined for a handful of loaves, perhaps for a small family or a special occasion. Oh no. This was the raw material for hundreds upon hundreds of portions, the daily bread for an entire bustling Parisian neighborhood. Think of the weight, the immense yielding mass of it, soft and slightly sticky to the touch. It would have been a slow, living entity, subtly shifting and breathing under its linen cover, a mountain to be conquered before the city even stirred from its slumber. Dividing this colossal amount, even with several pairs of hands, was a feat in itself, each section still a substantial challenge to wrangle. The sounds would be muted, but constant in this early hour. The soft tearing as portions were separated by practiced hands, the dull thud as they landed on floured boards, the rhythmic scrape of metal or wooden dividers. And through it all, the ever-present, slightly damp chill of the pre-dawn air mixing with the growing, almost palpable warmth from the awakening ovens, a promise of the inferno to come. This was less about the quiet romance of baking, and more about a relentless, daily campaign to feed the hungry. A truly staggering quantity of sustenance wrested from simple ingredients through sheer, unyielding toil. Now, with the dough portioned and perhaps roughly shaped, comes a silence almost as profound as the pre-dawn quiet it replaced, the crucial, anxious weight of the proving. Forget your neatly calibrated proofing drawers or temperature-controlled rooms. Those are luxuries of a far-off future. In 17th century Paris, such precision was pure fantasy. You, as our weary apprentice baker, would gently place your loaves, probably covered with coarse, flour-dusted linen cloths, in whatever nook or cranny of the bakery felt right that particular morning. This rightness wasn't learned from a book. It was a sixth sense, an intuition absorbed through skin and bone, honed over countless pre-dawn shifts, through trial, and undoubtedly through many heartbreakingly flat or overly sour errors. Imagine relying solely on the ambient warmth, a fickle friend at best. A slight, almost imperceptible draft from an ill-fitting window shutter. The unpredictable waves of heat radiating from the slowly awakening oven. Even the number of bodies bustling within the cramped, dim space. All these invisible currents would subtly alter the delicate living dance of yeast and flour. One day the dough might spring to life too eagerly, fermenting too quickly, threatening a sharply sour taste or a premature collapse. Another day, it might stubbornly refuse to swell, remaining dense and lifeless, promising a batch of heavy, unsatisfying loaves that would earn you little more than a customer's scorn. There were no precise thermometers to consult, no timers to set, only the feel of the air on your tired skin, the subtle, almost imperceptible changes in the dough's yielding texture under a tentative, floury finger, perhaps a whispered prayer to Saint Honoré, the patron saint of bakers, that this time, just this time, everything would align. It was a constant, quiet gamble against the whims of the environment, played out daily in the shifting half-light of the bakery. And whether that gamble paid off, whether Saint-Honoré smiled upon your efforts, one thing was absolutely certain. The day's toil would leave its undeniable mark, etched deep into your very bones. Long before the first eager customer even caught the faintest, most tantalizing whiff of baking bread, your shoulders would be screaming. Picture it, a deep, insistent burn, a slow fire ignited in the muscles from hours of relentless, rhythmic kneading, of hauling heavy sacks of precious flour, of wielding the long, cumbersome peel to slide loaves into the fiery, breathing maw of the oven. This wasn't a fleeting discomfort you could simply shake off. It was a constant, unwelcome companion, a dull throb that settled in and made itself stubbornly at home. Your back, too, would offer its own weary chorus of complaint. A persistent, grinding ache, perhaps a sharp, betraying twinge if you dared to move too quickly. A profound stiffness that made the simple act of straightening up feel like a monumental, almost impossible effort. Each vertebra would feel a little more compressed, a little more weary, a little more ancient than the last. Then, there were your hands. Ah, your hands. They would be the true, irrefutable testament to your craft. Rough as old, weathered wood, calloused thick from the constant friction of dough, the scrape of tools, the heat of the oven's breath. Flour, fine as ghostly dust, would be permanently ingrained, settling into every crease, every tiny crack in your skin, a pale, indelible signature that water alone could never quite, never fully, erase. This was the baker's mark, more telling than any fancy guild stamp, a powdery, painful badge of honor, or perhaps of servitude. Those hands, your constant companions in this flour-dusted world, knew the rhythm well. Not a sprightly jig, mind you, nor a graceful waltz. No. This was the rhythm of exhaustion, a slow, powerful dance with an unyielding partner, the dough itself. Imagine it now, a vast, cool, slightly sticky mountain on your wooden board. It breathes, almost. You can feel a subtle life in it, a quiet energy from the yeast. But mostly, you feel its stubborn weight, its reluctance to yield. Your first push is met with a heavy, doughy sigh. You lean your whole body into it, forcing the mass to fold, to turn. Your shoulders ache, a dull throb that radiates down your arms, into those already worn hands. The air around you, thick with the sweet, earthy smell of yeast and damp flour, grows warmer not from any external fire, but from the sheer heat of your own continuous exertion. The only sounds are the rhythmic slap and thud of dough against wood, the scrape of your bench knife, and perhaps your own quiet, steady breathing, a counterpoint to the dough's silent resistance. This isn't a brief skirmish, it's a drawn-out campaign. For hours, you and the dough are locked in this intimate, strenuous embrace. It demands your full attention, your unwavering strength. There's a strange sort of conversation happening, a wordless dialogue of pressure and release, of push and reluctant give. It has its own time, this dough, its own pace of becoming, and you are merely its servant, coaxing it, wrestling it, guiding it towards its destiny as bread. And as one batch finally surrenders, another is always waiting, a fresh challenge, a renewed demand on your already weary frame. Your arms ache, a deep, burning throb from shoulder to wrist. But you're not entirely alone in this dimly lit, flour-dusted world. If you're fortunate, or perhaps just established enough, you'll have apprentices. Young faces, some barely into their teens, smudged with soot and flour, their movements mirroring your own, albeit with less precision, more fumbling. They are here to learn, yes, but mostly they are here to labor alongside you, sharing the relentless rhythm of the bakery. Their small hands, often chapped and raw from the coarse flour and the endless washing, will also learn the feel of the dough, the searing heat of the oven's breath when they draw too near. You watch them, a tired but keen eye noting every clumsy push, every hesitant shaping of a future loaf. There's no gentle classroom here. Their lessons are etched in sweat, in aching muscles, in the occasional sharp word from you when fatigue frays everyone's temper. They learn by doing, by enduring, by surviving the day just as you do. The air is thick not just with the comforting scent of yeast and baking bread, but also with the unspoken understanding of shared hardship, a quiet camaraderie forged in the pre-dawn chill and the oppressive afternoon heat. These boys, or perhaps even a girl or two if the household is structured so, are your shadows, your extra pairs of hands, and your legacy, all rolled into one dusty, weary package. They are learning the ancient craft, not from books but from the very dust in the air and the burn of the oven on their skin. While the precious dough, your livelihood, begins its slow, puffy ascent beneath damp cloths, your attention, heavy with experience, turns to the oven. This isn't some modern convenience, switched on with a flick. No, this is a deep-bellied monster of brick and stone, often still radiating a stubborn warmth from yesterday's endeavors. Firing it is an art, a ritual passed down through generations of weary bakers, each movement born from countless repetitions, a silent language spoken between human and hearth. You select the wood with a knowing eye. Faggots of well-seasoned hardwood, perhaps beech or oak, stacked neatly nearby, their dry, splintered surfaces promising a clean, hot burn. You arrange them carefully inside the gaping maw, a precise architecture of kindling and larger pieces designed to coax the flames into an even, embracing heat throughout the cavernous interior. A flicker, a tentative orange spark caught on tinder, then the wood catches, crackling softly at first, a gentle whisper of the inferno to come. The initial smoke stings the eyes, acrid and sharp, before mellowing into the familiar, almost comforting aroma of burning timber that will soon perfume the entire street, a signal that bread is on its way. You don't just feed the fire, you conduct it, your gaze fixed, watching the dance of the flames, listening to their evolving song, feeling the gradual, insistent buildup of heat against your skin. The very color of the ancient bricks inside, glowing from a dull cherry to a brighter orange, will tell you when the moment is right, a subtle shift that only a master truly understands. This patient, watchful tending is crucial. A misjudgment now means disaster later, loaves either scorched to cinders or emerging pale, heavy, and lifeless. The air around you grows palpably hotter now, a dry, shimmering blanket that presses in as the oven slowly, powerfully, comes to life. The oven doesn't just radiate warmth now, it breathes fire, a silent, shimmering exhalation of pure, raw heat. As you approach its open mouth, perhaps to slide in the first hopeful batch of dough, you'd feel it. A tangible wave, a dry, intense blast that seems to physically push you back. It's the kind of ferocious heat that singes your eyebrows almost instantly, the fine hairs curling and crisping with a faint, acrid smell that mingles with the ancient scent of hot stone and distant wood smoke. Your throat would parch within moments, a constant nagging reminder of the miniature sun you're tending. This isn't the comforting glow of a hearth. It's a dangerous, almost sentient presence, leaning in to check the far corners for even temperature, or to swiftly sweep out the last stray embers, becomes an act of careful, almost unwilling bravery. A moment's lapse in concentration, a hand lingering too long, a loose fold of your rough linen shirt dangling too close, and the oven would deliver its searing kiss. This wouldn't be a minor inconvenience. It would be a burn that blisters angrily, weeps for days, and leaves a scar, a permanent, painful badge of your profession. The very air around it feels thick and solid with heat, shimmering visibly, making each breath you draw feel shallow, hot, and unsatisfying. You learn to move with a practiced, almost grudging economy, every gesture precise, because to linger too long is to invite not just injury, but an exhaustion that settles deep within your bones, long before the day is even halfway done. This scorching, ever-present companion is the relentless heart of your 17th-century Parisian bakery, demanding unwavering respect, and often a painful physical toll. And how do you even begin to tame this beast? To know when its fiery breath is just right for the delicate alchemy of bread. There are no neat little gauges here, no dials to consult. Your only thermometer is your own honed experience, a wisdom passed down through generations of scorched hands and watchful eyes. You learn to read the very soul of the oven. Perhaps you peer into its glowing heart, watching the bricks themselves. They shift in color, from a dull, sullen red to a brighter, more eager cherry, and finally to an almost incandescent hue that signals the peak of readiness. The way the heat haze dances above them tells its own story. Or maybe you'll cast a scant handful of flour onto the hot stones. Does it vanish in a puff of angry smoke, hissing as it chars instantly? Too hot. Does it sit there, pale and stubbornly indifferent? Not yet. You're waiting for that perfect, swift transformation to a beautiful toasted gold, its nutty scent whispering a fleeting promise of the loaves to come. And then there's the method that speaks most directly of your daily gamble. For the briefest of moments, a lightning-quick dip of your own hand into that shimmering heat. Not long enough to blister, heavens no, but just enough to feel its fierce kiss, to gauge its intensity against your skin. It's a conversation held in searing whispers, a dangerous but necessary intimacy with the very element that defines your days. This isn't science as we know it. It's an art, a risky, personal dialogue with the fire. The fire has spoken, its heat now a known quantity, confirmed by the ghost of a burn on your skin. Now the true test of your craft begins, the moment where precision meets raw heat. Beside you, the dough, risen and breathing, sits in its proving baskets. Dozens of pale, precious rounds, each one a promise of sustenance, a testament to hours of labor. You reach for the peel, that long, flat wooden tongue, worn smooth by countless bakings, its surface dusted with a fine layer of flour like a lingering morning frost. It feels familiar, an extension of your own arm, your only true intermediary with the inferno that awaits. Imagine lifting the first loaf. It's surprisingly light, yet fragile, a cloud of potential. With a practiced, almost reverent scoop, you slide the peel beneath it. Then, the dance. A swift, fluid lunge towards the oven's gaping, orange-glowing maw. The heat washes over your face and arms, a dry, demanding force. A precise flick of the wrist, a tiny, almost imperceptible adjustment, and the loaf slides from the peel onto the scorching stone floor, finding its exact, preordained spot within the fiery chamber. Another follows, and then another. Speed is of the essence here, a rhythmic, almost hypnotic urgency. Each second the oven door is open, precious heat bleeds away. A steady hand is paramount. A misjudged angle, a moment of hesitation, and a loaf could tumble, stick, or be placed too close to a neighbor, ruining its perfect rise. Lost flour, lost time, lost income. A small disaster in a day where margins are impossibly thin. This isn't just baking. It's a high-stakes placement. A silent, sweaty choreography performed against the relentless pulse of the flames. The oven door, a heavy slab of iron or thick scarred wood, groans shut, sealing the loaves within their fiery crucible. The intense heat remains, a silent, baking force, but the fire's presence extends far beyond that warmth, manifesting as a pervasive, almost tangible shroud of smoke and ash. It's not something you'd simply notice. It would be the very air you inhabit, day in, day out, a constant, unwelcome companion. Imagine for a moment breathing that air. It's no longer the crisp, clean air you might feel on your face as you drift off to sleep. Instead, it's a hazy, swirling soup, thick with the exhalations of the constantly burning wood. Your eyes would be the first to protest this invisible assault. A persistent, gritty sting, as if fine sand had been sprinkled across their delicate surface, making them water and burn. Blinking offers little relief, tears welling not from emotion, but from the acrid caress of the smoke that hangs heavy, a permanent fog in the dim light of the bakery. This isn't just a fleeting inconvenience. A fine gray powder, the ash from countless fires, would settle upon your skin, mingling with the sweat of your brow and arms until you felt perpetually coated. It would dust your hair, your clothes, becoming a second gritty skin that speaks volumes of your daily toil. You'd carry the scent of the bakery with you always, not the comforting aroma of fresh bread that wafts from modern shops, but the sharp, pervasive tang of soot and burning timber, a constant reminder. And with every breath, every sigh, microscopic particles of this airborne residue would find their way deep, deep into your lungs. A baker's cough, that hollow, rattling sound often heard in these workshops, wasn't just a trope. It was the grim soundtrack to a life spent quite literally breathing the bakery's very essence. And beyond the slow, insidious damage to your lungs, there was another, more immediate anxiety that would shadow your every working hour, a persistent whisper at the edge of your thoughts. It was the constant, quiet fear of the fire, the very heart of your bakery. The roaring oven with its flickering, hungry maw was also its greatest potential destroyer. You'd be acutely aware, wouldn't you, of every stray spark pirouetting into the shadows, every glowing ember that dared to escape its fiery confines onto the wooden floorboards, often slick with spilled grease or dusted with flammable flour. Your workplace, likely your home too, was probably a warren of old, dry timbers that had soaked up the heat and grime of decades, perhaps timbers that had seen generations of bakers come and go, each one living with this same quiet dread. Flour dust, fine as powdered silk, would hang in the air, coating every surface, a seemingly innocuous film that could, with the right errant flicker from a dropped coal or an untended candle, ignite with terrifying speed, a sudden bloom of orange against the gloom. There were no sophisticated alarms, no swift fire brigades to summon in those densely packed, shadowed Parisian streets. A hastily formed bucket chain, the frantic shouts of neighbors, and a fervent prayer were often the only defenses against a blaze that could leap from rooftop to rooftop with greedy abandon. You'd watch the flames in the oven's mouth, a mesmerizing, life-giving force that also held the power to consume everything you'd worked for, everything you owned. It's a heavy thought to carry, this constant, fragile dance with an element that could, in mere moments, turn your entire world to ash, smoke, and the bitter taste of ruin. And so, with the oven finally at its ferocious yet precisely judged heat, the loaves are slid inside. A brief, satisfying hiss as the cool dough meets the hot stone, a momentary cloud of steam, and then the heavy iron door is slammed shut, its clang echoing dully in the pre-dawn quiet. Now, a different kind of vigilance begins, the waiting. It's a period thick with anticipation, a silent, personal vigil kept by every baker throughout the city, a stillness punctuated only by the soft crackle of the dying embers you hope are just right. You can almost hear the faint internal crackle of the crusts forming, feel the immense heat radiating from the oven's bricked belly, a constant, warm presence in the dim bakehouse. The air, already thick with the comforting scent of yeast and warm flour, now begins to carry the first truly tantalizing whispers of baking bread, a fragrance that promises sustenance, comfort, perhaps even a small profit. But it's a promise not yet fulfilled, hanging fragile in the heated air. Every minute stretches, each one a tiny, nerve-wracking gamble. Inside that brick inferno, the fate of your entire day's labor, your precious income, your very reputation amongst the neighbors, is slowly, deliberately being decided. Too little time, and the loaves will be pale, doughy disappointments, difficult to sell, and quick to draw scorn from hungry customers. Too long, and they emerge as charred, bitter husks, fit only for the pigs, if you're lucky enough to have any, or perhaps to be discreetly tossed into the Seine under cover of darkness. There's no gleaming thermostat, no reassuring tick of a timer, beyond your own experience and intuition, honed over countless anxious mornings, just like this one. You might press your ear to the oven door, listening for the subtle song of the baking bread, trying to discern its progress through the thick brick and iron, a specific aroma, A particular quality of silence from within might be your only cue that perfection, or at least saleable quality, is near. The oven, your indispensable partner in this daily creation, also holds the power to ruin everything, with a subtle shift in its fiery mood, a forgotten log, a misjudged draft. It's a slow baking alchemy, and you are merely the hopeful, slightly terrified attendant waiting for the verdict. The moment arrives, the oven finally surrendering its bounty. With a wooden peel, long and smooth from years of faithful service, you begin to draw out the first batch. These are the loaves for the masses, the tonopane bis dark and wonderfully dense. Their crusts are a deep, rugged brown, almost charred in places, cracked like the dry earth of a long summer. The bakery air, already thick with the day's effort, now fills with their honest, deeply earthy scent, a comforting blend of fermented grain, the lingering smokiness of the wood fire, and a faint, almost sour tang that speaks of true sustenance. These loaves are heavy in your tired hands, wonderfully substantial, their crumb coarse but undeniably life-sustaining. Each one represents a family's meager meal, a small, baked testament to resilience. Then, perhaps, if you have managed to secure the precious finer flour and cater to a wealthier clientele, come the more refined creations. These are the beginnings of whiter breads, significantly paler in complexion, aspiring to a delicate airiness the common loaf can only dream of. The flour is softer, more temperamental, demanding a gentler hand in the kneading, a more watchful eye on the fickle oven's heat. The scent here is different too. A softer, sweeter aroma fills your small corner, less robust than the pain bisnack bees, more aspirational. These loaves, perhaps destined for a prosperous merchant's table or a minor noble's quiet breakfast, bake with their own particular set of anxieties. A breath too much heat and their delicate crusts scorch to bitterness. Too little, and they remain disappointingly pale and doughy inside. Each type, a world of texture and expectation unto itself, demanding its own particular devotion from your weary bones. And through all this, through the specific worries for each type of loaf, a more general, encompassing cloud begins to form, seeping into every dusty corner of the bakery. It's the aroma that, for many, defines a bakery, that warm, yeasty, almost caramelized scent of bread nearing its golden brown peak, a fragrance so potent it might even temporarily mask the ever-present smell of wood smoke and tired bodies. You'd breathe it in, of course, this perfume of your labor, the air growing thick and almost chewable with it. For a fleeting moment, it might even be comforting, a tangible sign that hours of sweat and careful tending are nearing fruition. But this delightful fragrance, this olfactory signature of your craft, is also a ticking clock. Its growing intensity, a silent, fragrant herald. Each wave of warmth from the oven, carrying a scent a little stronger, a little sweeter, or a little more robust than the last, reminds you that the moment of truth is fast approaching. Soon, those loaves will be drawn from the oven's fiery heart, presented to the world, or at least to your master, and they must be asterisk right. Not just edible, but an embodiment of the baker's art. The crust must sing with a hollow knock. The crumb must be yielding and soft, the color an advertisement of unspoken quality that speaks louder than any street vendor's cry. Because that wonderful smell, the one that might draw a hopeful, discerning customer to your door, or simply earn a nod of approval from the asterisk maître boulanger, also carries the immense weight of expectation. It's a fragrant promise whispered on the morning air, and in 17th century Paris, a baker's promises, even those unvoiced, were not taken lightly. A burnt batch, a heavy crumb, a pale crust. These weren't just a loss of precious ingredients. They were a stain on your reputation, a whisper of incompetence that could travel faster than the scent of your next, hopefully far better attempt. That lovely pervasive smell is a relentless countdown to judgment, all wrapped up in a comforting, deceptively gentle, weedy hug. That comforting, weedy hug, though, quickly gives way to the sharp focus of the trial. There's no room for gentle deception when the moment of truth arrives for each batch. You'd learn, very quickly, that your own senses are your most crucial, and perhaps only, reliable tools. Thermometers? Timers? Such luxuries are distant dreams. Instead, you'd peer into the oven's fiery maw, looking for that perfect shade of deep, russet gold on the crust, a color that speaks of a caramelized sweetness, not the pale ghost of underbaking or the acrid char of neglect. Then, with a practiced flick of the wrist, you'd draw a loaf out, the heat kissing your face. You'd tap its underside, listening intently. Is it that distinctive hollow thrum, almost like a small, well-tuned drum, that sings of a perfectly baked interior? Or is it a dull, heavy thud, a muffled note warning of a dense, doughy core still lurking within? Your fingertips, too, would become acutely sensitive, assessing the subtle resistance of the loaf, the gentle springback that indicates a light and airy structure, a promise kept. These aren't mere guesses, they are judgments honed by countless repetitions, by the harsh lessons of every spoiled batch, every dissatisfied customer. Your survival, quite literally, depends on this intimate sensory conversation with the bread. And so your survival hinges on that delicate conversation. But what happens when the conversation goes awry? When your senses, usually so astute, are deceived? Or the fickle heat of the oven plays its cruel tricks? The dread of a spoiled batch is a constant, lurking shadow in your small, flour-dusted world. Imagine pulling open that heavy oven door, not to the glorious sight of perfectly risen, golden-brown boules, but to a tray of blackened casualties. The air, moments before rich with the comforting promise of baked bread, now stings your nostrils with the acrid, bitter scent of char, or worse, perhaps the opposite failure. Loaves withdrawn too soon, their crusts pale and yielding, their hearts a dense, doughy disappointment, heavy as stones and just as unsaleable. Each ruined loaf is not merely a culinary misstep, it's a direct theft from your already thin purse. That precious flour, purchased with coins that could have bought a sliver of cheese or a measure of thin wine, is now useless. The wood, painstakingly gathered or bought, has burned for nothing but this bitter outcome. There's no easy discarding of these failures, no simple, try again tomorrow, without a cost. Each burnt crust, each undercooked crumb, represents food you cannot sell, and therefore food your own family might not eat. It's a quiet, stomach-gnawing despair, a heavy weight settling in the chest as you contemplate the loss, a stark reminder of how close to the edge you truly live. But the city, indifferent to your small, flour-dusted tragedies, begins to stir, its vast, slumbering body slowly uncurling. Through the grimy panes of a tiny window, or perhaps just the open arch of your doorway, the very first hint of gray light seeps in, a cool, almost reluctant messenger after a night of fiery toil and perhaps bitter disappointment. This is the dawn, and with it, the relentless demand for bread, whether your own baking has been a triumph or a quiet disaster. You, bone-weary and smelling of smoke and stale sweat, carry what sellable loaves you have, assuming any survived the capricious moods of your oven or the treachery of the yeast, to the front of your combined home and workshop. This shop is often little more than a simple wooden counter, perhaps a sturdy flour-dusted plank set across two barrels, facing directly onto the slowly awakening street. The air that drifts in is a complex, unfiltered perfume. The warm, almost sacred aroma of your hopefully decent bread, a sharp contrast to the damp earth, the lingering scent of yesterday's slops, animal refuse, and a general miasma of closely packed, unwashed humanity that so often characterized a Parisian morning. Wooden shutters, like sleepy eyelids, creak open on neighboring buildings. The distant, rhythmic clatter of unseen wooden wheels on uneven cobblestones echoes. A dog barks. A vendor somewhere further off begins their morning cry. You arrange your wares, each loaf a silent plea for a few precious coins. Your heart perhaps still heavy with the night's potential losses, your face schooled into a tired neutrality. The first potential customer, a bleary-eyed apprentice or a sharp-nosed matron, might soon appear, their gaze critically assessing your morning's offering, and by extension, your very livelihood. And then they come. Not in a rush, not yet, but as a slow trickle, figures emerging from the pre-dawn gloom, drawn by the faint, warm promise of your oven. You watch them approach, their faces often still creased with sleep, shadows under their eyes mirroring your own. A young journeyman, perhaps, clutching a few hoarded lillards, his hunger a palpable thing in the cool air. Or maybe it's the housekeeper from a grander residence nearby, her expression already stern, her fingers ready to pinch and prod, testing the crust for its telltale crackle, judging the weight in her hand. Their moods, you've learned, are as varied as the shapes of your loaves, and often hinge entirely on your success or failure at the hearth hours before. A cheerful greeting is rare. More common is a grunt, a mumbled inquiry about the price, or simply a pointed finger at their chosen bread. They are here for sustenance, not pleasantries, and their day will be shaped, in small part, by what you offer. The scent of your fresh bread, a rich, earthy perfume that to you now just smells of relentless labor, is a beacon to their empty stomachs. Yet, their approval is a fragile thing. A slightly too dark crust, a loaf that feels a little light for its size, or a price a fraction higher than they deem fair, and their faces can shudder, their custom drifting away as silently as they arrived, perhaps to a rival whose flour was finer that week, or whose luck with a temperamental fire was simply better. Each coin dropped into your waiting palm feels like a small, weary victory, a brief reprieve before the next shadowy figure shuffles towards your stall, their own morning hunger, a quiet, insistent demand. And it's not just the hungry eyes of the public you need to satisfy. That small pouch of coins, feeling so heavy in your flour-dusted apron, isn't entirely your own to count. Above the murmur of the marketplace, another, colder authority looms, the city officials. They care little for your exhaustion or the rebellious nature of your sourdough starter. Their concern is order. And in 17th century Paris, order often began with the price of bread, a figure dictated not by your costs, but by their decree. Men with stern faces and even sterner measuring tools might arrive unannounced, their presence chilling the already cool morning air around your stall. Your beautiful, fragrant loaves, each one a testament to your pre-dawn labor, would be scrutinized. They'd bring out their own weights, their own scales, their eyes missing nothing. A loaf found even slightly underweight, or quality deemed subpar. Perhaps the crumb not quite right, the texture a little too coarse for their liking, could mean more than just a lost sale. It could mean a hefty fine, the confiscation of your precious flour, or worse, a public shaming that would cling to your name like the persistent scent of smoke. You'd stand there, heart thudding a dull rhythm against your ribs, praying that the scales balanced, that the crust was judged perfect, that this particular official had enjoyed a good breakfast. Because in this world, a simple baker's livelihood rested not just on skill, but on the whim of an inspector and the unyielding letter of the law. Every batch was a gamble, every sale a temporary reprieve from a system designed to keep you precariously balanced on the edge. And amidst all this daily trepidation, one particular loaf often loomed larger than others in your troubled thoughts. The pain du roi, the king's bread. This wasn't just any bread. It was a statement, a standard. You might have been obligated to produce it, perhaps for direct supply, or simply as a benchmark of quality that guild officials would scrutinize with an almost religious fervor. Imagine the pressure, knowing that this particular batch, often made with finer, whiter flour, a precious commodity, would be held to an exacting ideal. The crust needed to be a perfect, sun-kissed gold, the crumb light and even, without the dense, grayish cast of commoner's fare. Each loaf was a testament, not just to your skill, but to the honor of the entire guild, and by extension, the well-fed contentment of those in power. An inspector wouldn't just weigh the pain du roi, they would appraise it, perhaps even taste it, their expression unreadable. The silence in your small, hot bakery would feel thick enough to choke on, every crackle from the cooling racks sounding like a thunderclap. To fail with the king's bread was more than a simple mistake. It was an affront, a blemish on your reputation that could be ruinously difficult to bake away. It was a constant, nagging worry, another thread in the intricate web of obligations and potential pitfalls. that defined your sweltering, flour-dusted existence. This single loaf, so symbolic, could elevate you slightly, or cast you down with damning finality. But the singular, monumental stress of the king's bread was merely the prelude to a daily opera of public opinion. Once that particular loaf was dispatched, your small, hot bakery would brace for the relentless tide of ordinary Parisians, each carrying their own exacting standards and very often a sharp tongue. The air still thick with the ghost of wood smoke and warm yeast from your dawn labors would soon carry the discordant notes of dissatisfaction from less forgiving patrons. You'd learn to listen, really listen, as a shopper peered suspiciously at your best miche, their finger perhaps tracing its dark, caramelized crust with a skeptical frown. A bit too bien cute asterisk for my liking, baker, they might sigh, the implication hanging heavy. That you, amidst the infernal heat and endless toil, had somehow failed them personally. Another might thump a loaf as if testing its very soul, declaring it too light, too airy, perhaps even suspecting you of skimping on the good, honest flour you'd fought to procure at a fair price. And the price itself, the price! That was a battleground trod daily, a source of endless haggling and aggrieved pronouncements, regardless of the scarcity or the true cost of your own precious supplies. To survive this, you'd need more than just strong arms for kneading dough for hours on end. You'd need to cultivate a patient ear, one capable of absorbing these complaints like a dry sponge, and skin as resilient as the oldest, most fermented sourdough starter. Each critique, whether whispered in hushed disappointment or declared with theatrical outrage across your worn wooden counter, had to be met with a degree of calm you rarely, truly felt. It was a performance in its own way, a weary diplomacy conducted over stacks of cooling bread, where a misplaced word or a defensive tone could sour relations as quickly as a bad batch of yeast. This daily gauntlet of grumbles, this unending stream of small dissatisfactions, was simply part of the bitter recipe for your survival in 17th century Paris. But beyond that daily symphony of customer complaints, a far more insidious anxiety hummed constantly beneath the surface of your 17th century Parisian bakery. This wasn't merely about a customer's fleeting dissatisfaction over a slightly burnt crust. This was about your very livelihood, your reputation, even your freedom, constantly under the cold scrutiny of the guild and city officials. Picture this, an unannounced visit. The air in your small shop, usually thick with the comforting aroma of yeast and warm dough, suddenly chills. An official, face impassive, perhaps a little too well-fed for your liking, steps in, his eyes missing nothing. He might demand to see your weights, the polished brass gleaming dully in the dim light from your shopfront. You'd hold your breath, every muscle tensing, as he places one of your painstakingly crafted loaves on the city's official scale. Was it a fraction too light? A simple misjudgment in the pre-dawn rush, born of exhaustion? Or would it be declared an intentional short-waiting in his eyes? The accusation alone, whispered down the narrow street, could be devastating. Then there was the flour itself, the very heart of your craft. A malicious rumor, perhaps started by a rival or a disgruntled former apprentice, that you'd stretched your precious and expensive supply with chalk, ground beans, or even finer sawdust, could spread like wildfire through the quarter. The consequences were not gentle, nor were they rare. Heavy fines could wipe out weeks of backbreaking profit in an instant, plunging you and your family into debt that clung like damp flour. Public humiliation was a very real terror. Imagine being locked in the pillory in the market square, the rough, splintered wood chafing your neck, pelted not just with scathing insults, but with whatever rotten fruit or vegetable refuse the crowd deemed fit. And for graver or repeated offenses, the dank, unforgiving stone walls of a prison, or even exile from the city you called home, were stark, looming possibilities. This gnawing fear, a bitter metallic tang beneath the sweet, earthy scent of fresh bread, was a daily companion you could never quite shake. And as if those anxieties weren't enough to sour the sweetest morning roll, beyond your customers, beyond the bailiffs, you operated under the constant, unblinking gaze of the Bakers' Guild. Think of them not as colleagues, but as overseers, a powerful, almost unseen force, whose dictates shaped nearly every facet of your working life, and indeed, much of your personal one. Their rules, meticulously inscribed in heavy ledgers, governed the very essence of your craft. They decided the precise weight each loaf must achieve, no more, no less. A few grams light, and you faced their wrath. A few grams heavy, and you were cheating yourself, a fool in their eyes. The quality of flour, the types of grain you were permitted to use, even sometimes the prices you could charge, all were subject to their stringent approval. Imagine the quiet tension as a guild inspector, perhaps a portly man with a perpetually skeptical expression, entered your shop, the little bell above the door announcing not a customer, but a judge. His fingers, surprisingly delicate, would press into your carefully crafted crust. His nose would twitch, assessing the aroma, searching for any hint of imperfection, any deviation from the established norm. The air, already thick with the comforting scent of baking bread and the warmth of the ovens, would suddenly feel charged, heavy with unspoken judgment. This wasn't just about baking. It was about conforming, day in and day out, to a rigid set of expectations, a life lived under a microscope, where every crumb carried consequence, and the simple joy of creation was often overshadowed by the chilling breath of regulation. That watchful eye, that critical sniff, was merely the daily ritual, the overture to a much larger, more intricate dance of compliance. Surviving in this tightly bound world of Parisian bakers meant more than just mastering the alchemy of flour and water. It meant navigating a suffocating labyrinth of obligations before your first batch even saw the heat of the oven. First, the fees, a constant gnawing drain. Gold and silver coins, painstakingly earned, would jingle reluctantly into the guild's coffers, not for precious ingredients or essential firewood, but for the mere privilege of being. The right to call yourself boulanger, the permission to feel the familiar warmth of your own ovens, all came at a steep, recurring price. It was a quiet tax on your sweat, a down payment on your continued precarious existence within the trade. Then came the rules, a veritable blizzard of them, penned in dense, spidery script on pages that seemed to multiply like worried thoughts in the dead of night. Imagine, if you will, regulations dictating the precise, non-negotiable weight of your pain de mie, the exact proportion of rye to wheat in your pain de campagne, the specific, approved flours for your asterisk tourte de sigle. There were rules for the shapes of loaves, the days you were permitted to sell certain goods, even the patterns scored onto the crust. A rule for every type of crumb, it felt. A statute for every conceivable shade of golden brown. And the inspections? They weren't a rare theatrical event, but a recurring shadow. A constant, quiet hum beneath the crackle of the fire, and the chatter of early morning customers. Each unannounced visit was a fresh wave of anxiety, your heart thumping a nervous rhythm against your ribs. A careful performance of deference and absolute obedience. Your reputation, your very livelihood, hung by the delicate, easily snapped thread of their satisfaction, their quickly scribbled notes in a ledger that held your fate. Conformity, you see, wasn't just encouraged. It was the very air you were forced to breathe, the invisible, non-negotiable ingredient in every recipe. To deviate, to experiment with a new spice, to bake a loaf a fraction too large out of generosity, these were not signs of innovation, but acts of defiance. In this rigidly structured world, the scent of your unique, perhaps rebellious, bake, if too distinct from the prescribed aroma, could very well be the scent of your own professional undoing, the quiet extinguishing of your ovens. And if the guild's watchful eye didn't dim your hearth, there was always the matter of your fellow bakers. Just beyond your own door, perhaps only a few cobblestones away, their ovens glowed too, their chimneys puffed out competing plumes of fragrant smoke. Each street, each tiny quarter of Paris, was a chessboard of sorts, and every baker a player, vying for the precious limited custom of the local populace. You might nod a polite bonjour to Monsieur Dubois from across the lane, even share a grimace over the rising price of firewood, but beneath that thin veneer of civility, the currents ran deep and often cold. Imagine the daily dance, you arranging your precious loaves, the golden crusts still warm to the touch, their yeasty perfume a siren song. But then, the scent from Madame Perrier's shop, a little further down, wafts by. Perhaps a hint of anise, she's daringly if discreetly added. Your stomach tightens. Is her bread a shade darker, more appealing today? Did her apprentice manage to secure better flour? Somehow, somewhere, while your own felt disappointingly coarse between your fingers? The anxiety was a constant companion, a bitter aftertaste to even the sweetest brioche, a fine powder of worry settling over everything. This wasn't just about friendly rivalry, you see. It was about survival, a stark and simple truth. A lost customer wasn't merely a disappointment. It was a dent in your meager earnings, a step closer to your children going without, the hollow echo in an emptying coin purse. Whispers could ruin a reputation faster than rats could spoil a sack of grain. A rumor of short waits, a suggestion of stale ingredients, perhaps even a darkly insinuated pact with something unsavory to achieve that perfect, almost suspiciously consistent rise. Such was the air you breathed, thick with the scent of baking bread, yes, but also with suspicion, and the ever-present quiet hum of competition that could at any moment turn sharp. And should that sharp edge of competition manifest not as a whispered rumor, but as a formal accusation, the world around you would seem to shrink. The ancient unyielding rules of the Bakers' Guild, or the city's own precise ordinances, were not suggestions. They were iron bands. A misstep, perhaps your scales tipped by a hair too little in the customer's favor, or your flour not quite the prescribed grade. Even selling a warm pain de mie after the evening bell had tolled its somber curfew could bring the full weight of authority down upon your flour-dusted shoulders. Then came the penalties, delivered with a chilling lack of sentiment. A hefty fine might be levied, the coins demanded feeling like cold stones in your palm, each one a palpable piece of your family's future being chipped away. Or imagine the scene. Stern-faced officials, their expressions unreadable, methodically confiscating your precious goods. Your golden, fragrant loaves, still radiating the oven's warmth, their crusts crackling a soft lament, piled unceremoniously onto a cart, trundled away down the cobbled street. The familiar, comforting scent of your bakery now tinged with the bitter aroma of failure and public shame. But the true specter haunting every baker was the threat of being banned entirely. To have your ovens, the fiery soul of your livelihood, declared cold by official decree. Your guild membership, the parchment that proclaimed you a master of your craft, rendered void. It was more than just losing a job. It was an erasure of your identity, your skill, your place in the intricate web of Parisian life. Imagine standing before your silent, cooling hearth, the tools of your trade gathering dust, your hands, so accustomed to the rhythm of kneading and shaping, now idle and aching. What then? The city offered few soft landings for a baker stripped of his fire. But let's imagine your ovens still roared, your guild membership proudly displayed. Even then, the daily reality of your 17th century Parisian bakery was far from a quaint, flour-dusted dream. It was a constant, quiet war, waged not with decrees or rival guilds, but against an army of tiny, relentless invaders. Your bakery, despite your most meticulous efforts, would be a favored haunt for creatures you never invited. Listen closely in the pre-dawn stillness, even before the comforting crackle of the reviving fire. You might hear it. The furtive skittering of rats, bold shadows darting just beyond the lamplight, their eyes like tiny, gleaming beads. Mice, smaller but no less persistent, would navigate your shelves as if they owned them, leaving their minute telltale signs amidst the sacks of precious flour, often drawn by a lingering dampness that clung to the ancient stone walls. And the flour itself, the flour. It was a constant battle against the weevils, those minute beetles that could turn your finest milled grain into a subtly writhing mass. Every scoop felt like a gamble, a close inspection under the flickering candlelight a necessity. The air, rich with the promise of warm bread, might also carry a faint, unsettling undertone, the musty signature of these unwelcome, persistent patrons. You'd set your traps, perhaps enlist a weary mouser, but it felt like stemming a tide with a thimble. Each morning was a fresh assessment of the nightly incursions, a quiet, wearying siege against an enemy that never truly surrendered, only retreated temporarily. And that fine, almost invisible dust from those tiny, persistent invaders, mingling with the stone-ground flour from the mill, was just one layer you'd contend with. As dawn broke, or perhaps, more accurately, as the pre-dawn gloom began to thin, you'd already be hours into your labor, a film of sweat and flour clinging to you like a second skin. Personal cleanliness, as we imagine it today with steaming showers and fragrant soaps, was a concept far removed from your daily existence. Water itself was a precious, often murky commodity. It wasn't simply a matter of turning a tap. It might be hauled from a communal well, its clarity questionable, or purchased at a price from a water carrier, its journey through the Parisian streets adding its own unique bouquet. This was water for drinking, for mixing dough, rarely for lavish personal washing. The soap you might encounter, if any, was a harsh, lye-based concoction, more adept at stripping skin than gently cleansing. Imagine the constant sweat, the heat of the ovens making your small bakehouse a sweltering cavern even on cooler days. Flour dust settled everywhere, in your hair, your clothes, caking in the creases of your skin, mingling with the soot from the fires. There was no escaping the grime. Your hands plunged repeatedly into sticky dough, then dusted with flour, wiped on a perpetually soiled apron, would bear the marks of your trade. Ingrained dirt beneath the fingernails, calluses thick and hard, the scent of your own body, a mixture of honest toil, stale sweat, and the pervasive aroma of yeast and wood smoke would be your constant companion. A quick splash of cool water on the face might be the extent of your morning ablutions, a brief, inadequate ritual before facing another long, arduous day, and it wasn't just the visible grime that clung to you. The very air you'd breathe, hour after hour, carried its own unseen burdens. Imagine that bakery perpetually dusted not just on surfaces, but suspended in the atmosphere, a fine, almost ethereal mist of flour. Each breath would draw these tiny particles deep into your lungs. At first, perhaps just a tickle, a dry cough. But over years, this relentless inhalation often led to what was grimly understood, even then, as, quote, baker's asthma, a persistent wheeze, a tightness in the chest that never truly eased, the air feeling thick and resistant, as if you were trying to draw life from a woolen blanket. Then there was the smoke. Those magnificent heat-radiating ovens, the very heart of the bakery, were voracious consumers of wood. They belched out a constant stream of smoke, sometimes a gentle haze, other times a stinging cloud that made your eyes water and your throat rasp. This acrid companion, day in and day out, settled in the lungs, just like the flour, a slow, damaging sediment. Chronic coughs were the soundtrack to many a baker's later years. Their breathing labored, their chests heavy with the unseen accumulation of their craft. It was a slow, creeping affliction, an invisible toll for the daily bread. The price for that warm, crusty loaf was often paid with the baker's own breath, year by weary year. Beyond the unseen damage to your lungs, the bakery held more immediate, more visceral threats, etched daily onto the baker's very skin. The heart of your workspace, the oven, was a fickle beast. Its fiery breath could kiss your loaves to golden perfection, but it could just as easily brand your unwary arm with a searing stripe of pain. Imagine the sudden, intense heat as you reached deep inside, the way your skin would pucker and blister, almost instantly if you misjudged the distance by a mere inch. The acrid scent of singed hair or even flesh might mingle with the comforting aroma of baking bread, a grim counterpoint to your craft. Then there were the tools, simple perhaps, but sharp enough. A slip of a knife while scoring dough, a misjudged chop of wood for the fire, and a deep gash could bloom crimson against the white flour dusting your hands. These weren't clean surgical cuts. They were ragged invitations to whatever unseen malevolence lurked in the grime of a 17th century city. And the lifting. Oh, the lifting. Sacks of grain, bundles of firewood, trays heavy with dough, all demanding a strength that, over time, would grind down even the sturdiest frame. Your back would ache with a dull, persistent fire, your shoulders would scream in protest, a constant reminder of the body's slow surrender to relentless toil. In an age before even a whisper of germ theory, any of these common injuries, a burn, a cut, even a deep splinter, could become a death sentence. There were no soothing antiseptic creams, no sterile bandages carefully applied by gentle hands. Instead, perhaps a poultice of questionable herbs, or worse, something that might actively invite infection rather than cure it. You might watch a small wound fester, swelling with an angry heat, the surrounding skin turning a sickly, ominous color, as your body fought a losing battle against an invisible enemy. Such was the fragile line between daily work and mortal peril. Beyond the immediate threat of such an infection, consider the relentless nature of your work as a Parisian baker. There were no sick days to call in, no understanding foreman to send you home with pay, no compassionate HR department to consult. If you couldn't knead the dough, if you couldn't stoke the great hungry maw of the oven, you simply didn't earn. And if you didn't earn, your family didn't eat. It's a stark, unforgiving equation, etched into the very fabric of 17th century life. Imagine, if you will, that burn on your arm throbbing with a fierce, insistent pain, or a deep cough racking your body with every difficult breath, perhaps stirring the ever-present flour dust in the air around you. You'd still be expected at the bakery before the first pale light of dawn kissed the Parisian rooftops. Perhaps you'd try to hide your weakness, to push through the agony or the fever, your movements becoming slower, clumsier, inviting further mishap. Each lift of a heavy sack of flour, each swing of the long baker's peel guiding loaves into the heat, would be a fresh wave of torment. There was no concept of workers' compensation, no safety net woven by society to catch you if you fell, literally or figuratively. An injury or illness that laid you up for a week, even just a few days, could spell utter disaster. The few sous or deniers squirreled away, if any, would dwindle with alarming speed. The meager portion of yesterday's bread you might have been permitted to bring home would vanish. Hunger, a constant, unwelcome companion for so many, would sharpen its claws, becoming a gnawing, palpable presence in your small, often damp and crowded home. Your livelihood, and that of your loved ones, hung by the precarious, fraying thread of your continued ability to endure, day after grueling, exhausting day. It was a heavy burden to carry, heavier even than the largest sacks of flour upon your aching back. As the last embers in the oven sigh their final, fading warmth, and the deep indigo of a Parisian night truly settles over the sleeping city, you might dare to believe your marathon is over. But the bakery, your small, flour-dusted kingdom, isn't quite ready to release you just yet. It demands a final act of devotion, a thorough cleansing under the tired, flickering glow of perhaps a single tallow lamp, its meager light casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The air, still fragrant with the comforting memory of baked bread, now mingles with the faint, damp scent of stone and the slightly acrid tang of old ashes you must painstakingly sweep from the oven's cooling maw. Imagine yourself now, every muscle in your body humming with a dull, persistent ache, your hands grasping the worn, splintery handle of a heavy broom. Its bristles, stiff and unyielding, whisper and scrape across the uneven stone floor, coaxing fugitive crumbs and fine, ghostly clouds of flour from every hidden crevice and shadowed corner. Each sweep, a small, tired act of defiance against the day's accumulated chaos. Then comes the scrubbing. Cool, slightly murky water sloshed onto the heavy wooden workbenches, their surfaces worn smooth and almost polished by countless kneading hands. The stubborn grit of dried dough yielding slowly, reluctantly, beneath your efforts. There's a strange, almost meditative quality to this relentless tidying, a weary, solitary ritual performed in the hushed stillness of the late hour. It's the bakery's last quiet demand before it allows you to finally stumble towards whatever meager rest awaits you in your cramped quarters. this final polish, this resetting of the stage for tomorrow's almost identical, arduous performance, is a task as utterly essential as the kneading itself. Only then, with the surfaces wiped as clean as they can be, and the floor relatively clear of the day's debris, can the heavy door be truly barred against the silent, watching night. And so, with the door finally secured, you turn away from the silent bakery. Each step towards your small, probably shared sleeping space is an effort. The day's heat, the endless lifting, the constant standing, it all settles into your bones now, a profound heaviness that seems to seep into the very marrow. Your shoulders ache, your back groans in protest, and your hands, raw and chapped, throb with a dull, persistent pain. It's more than just tiredness. It's an exhaustion so complete it feels like a physical part of you, woven into your sinews. Sleep, when it finally comes, is less a gentle drift into oblivion and more a collapsing under the weight of this fatigue. It's a fitful, shallow affair, punctuated by the lingering smell of soot and yeast that clings to your clothes, your hair, even your skin. The few hours of darkness offer little true restoration. Your mind might quieten from the day's anxieties about dough rising or customers complaining, but your body remembers. It holds on to the strain, knowing that this reprieve is fleeting, almost illusory, a brief pause in an unending symphony of labor. For this bone-deep weariness is a constant companion, a shadow that sleep might momentarily dim, but never truly banishes. It's a fatigue that will greet you, cold and unwelcome, when the pre-dawn chill seeps back into your room. Long before the first hint of gray light touches the Parisian rooftops, the familiar ache will be your alarm clock, a grim reminder that the brief interlude of stillness is already winding down. The relentless gears of your life as a baker are preparing to grind back into motion. Tomorrow, the fire must be stoked anew, the flour dusted, the city fed. And the cycle, unforgiving and absolute, begins again. The brief window for rest is hardly restorative. It's a snatched couple of hours, perhaps on a rough straw pallet in a cramped alcove. The air still thick with the ghosts of the day's baking, the phantom scent of scorched flour, the faintest warmth from the cooling ovens. The sounds of Paris, even in its deepest slumber, are never truly silent. A distant shout, the scuttling of rats in the walls, the ever-present murmur of a city that breathes even in darkness. This isn't sleep as you know it, a soft surrender, but a brief, grudging truce with exhaustion. And so, as you imagine drifting off now, sinking into your own welcoming comfort, picture that Parisian baker, not easing into a soft mattress, but collapsing, muscles still screaming, onto a surface that offers little solace. Their dreams, if they come, are likely fleeting, perhaps troubled by the phantom weight of dough or the fear of a spoiled batch. It's a respite measured in minutes, not hours, a hurried pit stop before the brutal demands of the next day's inferno and toil. This intense, almost unimaginable daily grind, from before the stars have faded to long after they reappear, defines their existence. Each loaf a small victory against hunger, both theirs and the city's. And so, as you imagine drifting off, not to a comfortable bed but to a brief respite before another Herculean day, perhaps you can appreciate why surviving even one day as a 17th century Parisian baker would be an extraordinary feat. A testament to a resilience that borders on the superhuman, fueled by little more than stale bread and sheer unyielding will. Thank you for joining us on PlotFall. Until our next story, may your thoughts be calm and your rest deep.